Yeah, let's start the presentation. So I'm normally doing this in person. I'm in the same room, so I hope I'm not really a fan of online. I guess I have to get used to it because of COVID and everything, but well, at least it allows us to reach a higher percentage of people around the world. So if you have any question, as said before, please do it at the end or write it in the chat if you think you would forget about it. No problem. We'll read at the end because I have just one screen, and if I do the presentation, I cannot see the chat at the same time. So remote tower operations. My presentation will I will try to give you an overview of the concept of remote tower. So you don't need anything to know about how it operates at the beginning. You don't need any background. I'm here to explain everything. And we will see together not only how it does it work, what do you need to create a remote tower, but also the different challenges, the different opportunities that it brings, and a kind of um, explanation of the different running installations and the projects. I already must push a disclaimer. The problem is that for different reasons, I'm only allowed to talk about my company, which is Frequentis, as you can see here. So I will try to be as general as possible, but any concrete example must be from my company. I'm not allowed to use any picture that we could have from other companies for, yeah, right, image right reasons, here, GPD and all the things. So yeah, so you can then do your research, but I'm pretty sure there are many things you can discover beyond what I'll be able to discuss with you. So let's dive in. First, I will present you the company Frequentis because for yeah, it's not really that known as I saw around the world, and I will also give you my background. So I don't know if you have any questions related to that, we can have it later or by email, not directly tonight. And then we'll be able to see what is remote towers. So basically, what is the concept? What are the operations? What are the differences between this and traditional towers, ATC? And also give you a detailed explanation of each of the bricks that you can need to create a remote tower. After seeing what is a remote tower, we'll see how we'll do remote tower operations, like the different modes we can have, and then we'll more focused on why we do remote towers. So the different advantages, costs, benefits, challenges for the new technology, and also the different installations that, as I said before, Frequentis is running around the world. And as an opening at the end, I will give you a small oversight about a small overview about the special case of multiple remote towers and explain to you why it is a bit special. So first, what is Frequentis? Well, Frequentis is a company specialized in control rooms around the world, operating in many, many different countries. Um, the One of the main departments, but we have others, is the ATC. Uh, we have around 2,200 employees. Overall, we have most, I think, 800 in Vienna, in Austria. And then we have others in different branches, so US, Australia, Brazil, etc. And if we go specifically into ATC, we have a department that is called 1ATM. To give you an overview, basically, whatever the software you can think about for ATC, we do it. For voice, for approach, for towers, we have a whole suite of different possibilities, different softwares that are combined together to give integrated solutions and integrated CWPs. And after my company, what is my background? Well, the first reason I'm here tonight is because I did IENAC as a university as an engineer. At this time, it was the old way of doing things. So we had T, L, and S, so three letters for three different majors. I did S, which is, I think, today computer science and air traffic control, air traffic management. And then on the final year, so master two, second year, I did a master in human computer interactions at University Paul Sabatier. So it was, I think it still is dual diploma, which gave me a kind of love for how things are done between humans and machines. But I really wanted to know a bit more about the human sides. And so I specialized afterwards in using a PhD in neuroeconomics at the Onera Salon de Provence, so which is near Marseille, where I could know a bit more about how humans operate, how the brain operates at work. After that, I joined shortly the CNRS at Aix-Marseille to work as a research assistant, but I quickly switched for different reasons to the private sectors and joined Airbus Protect, which was previously known as APSIS, in the newly created human factors team that was here to enhance security, especially in the cockpit. And for family reasons, in 2021, I moved to Austria, to Vienna, where I joined Frequentis as firstly as a solution architect and then as a requirement manager since almost 1 year now. So if we dive into the concept directly, I will start by giving you an example using a small airport in Iceland. Um, the town is called Akureyri. I hope I'm saying it right. And Akureyri is the second most populated area outside the capital Reykjavik. The airport itself is operated by Isavia, which is the local ANSP. And interesting thing about Akureyri is that during the 2010 eruption, so I won't try to say the volcano's name. I think if you take the standard way, it's called E15, so I will stick to that. When E15 entered eruption, Akureyri became the major airport in Iceland. Why? Because Reykjavik was directly under the different clouds of ashes, and so um, planes there couldn't actually take off or land. So a small regional airport directly became the main and major airport for the whole country. And after that, so they managed it. I don't know how, but they did. And after that, they started to question how could we prepare if it happens again? Because Iceland has quite a lot of volcanoes, active volcanoes. And they started investigating remote towers. And why could remote towers help here? Well, remote tower, if we take the basic from the basic, from the ED 250, 240 B standard from EuroK, remote tower is a technology that enables the provision of aerodrome ATS from a location without direct visual observation. That is a standard definition of what is remote tower. And what it means is that remote tower can be anything where you don't have direct view over the airports. So when you're not directly seeing planes, vehicles, humans, or whatever you have to control. That could be a remote tower control with more modules that could be there. Fais attention au sac. Cool. Sorry, the other one. Um, so if we give to you a few acronyms that I use throughout the presentation, it would make everything easier. So the Remote Tower Center, abbreviated out RTC, is directly the center where all the modules are centralized. A module or remote tower module can encompass most of the time one, but can be also more CWPs. I will explain later how it does this. And the presentation and the acronym that is mostly used if you want to read the standard is RTOS, the Remote Tower Optical System, and is directly all the cameras on the airports. Mainly, sometimes can be used for the system itself. The history itself, well, we didn't directly come up like this. I think it has been quite a known word, sometimes used as buzzword for the last, I'd say, 2 years, maybe after the COVID. We didn't directly jump into it. It's really a research that has been going on for at least 30, 35 years now. The first mention of remote towers was not directly remote towers, was the use of virtual reality for ATC. That was the main idea before. It was used during some discussions between DLR and FAA. So DLR, which is Germany, and FAA, which is the NSP for US, for USA. And then after a few research during the Raptor project, the European research switched to using, instead of virtual reality, remote towers, because they saw it as much more promising, easier to achieve, which, yeah, virtual reality in 2005 wasn't really that great. And also we weaker to actually deploy. And then NASA, FAA, this corporation switched to have fully remote ATC using remote towers, so research on this side, until at least for Europe, CESAR, so which is the General Research Coordinator for Europe, took over the different national projects. So they had some in Sweden between SAB and the local ANSP, and they had also in Germany, which were pretty advanced. They took over everything and tried to merge it so that it could advance at the same pace and share everything together. And for example, the EuroK standard is really a good opportunity because people from private and public sectors actually cooperated to bring their expertise with Eurocontrol. So I gave you a whole lot of explanations and different concepts. Now, what is remote tower from scratch? Remote tower, as we saw, is if you don't have any direct view over what you control over the airport. So for this, firstly, you need some sensors. The main ones are pretty obviously the cameras. So you'll have the panorama, you'll have some what we call the PTZ, the pan tilt to zoom camera, which can move around. And then you have also that is not really mandatory, but it's really useful to improve the immersion. That is the microphone to hear the ambient sound or aircraft engines or whatever other sound you could have if you are directly in the tower. Oh, sorry. And then all this information, all those streams are put through a WAN, so a wide area network, so over the internet basically, through VPN and some other cybersecurity measures to the RTC to be presented to the controllers. So it's not about automated control. I mean, it's not about artificial intelligence or whatever replacing controllers. It's about just shifting controllers to another place and doing the same job as they are doing right now, but with the use of technology and, as I said, without direct view over the airport. To this, you cannot just send directly data in there. You have to optimize data. You have to use some algorithms. So you need some servers, some processing units, and also you need some recording units because servers are mandatory to improve the image and make sure that at the end you have something that is as close as possible to what they could see in the tower. But recording is actually just mandatory because it's the law. Many different ANSPs actually require that any screen that is used be recorded throughout the control to be sure that we know what the controller was actually seeing, especially for remote towers. So if we take the first brick and the most important one, it will be the panorama. When I say panorama, it's, as you can see on the screen, many different cameras, so many between 3 and 16 cameras that will be put around a ring, or maybe half a ring, or maybe a quarter of a ring, to give a stitched view if you put the different images together and reproduce actually what the controller can see, what we say the out the window view, what they could see when they were in the tower. For this, you need image that is sufficient quality. So we are more and more switching from high definitions to 4K. And also you'll need to have no doubled objects. Doubled objects, what I mean is that if you put two images together, they may be slightly switched or shifted, sorry. Maybe the cameras could be not exactly well installed, which means one plane being at the edge of one camera could also appear on the camera, the next camera, which is a big problem because then you'll see that you have two planes instead of one. And for this, what we use are the Johnson criteria, which are actually for each airport, you will define what you should be able to see on each of the different places of the airport. So like a plane on the parking slot, an animal at the far end of the threshold, of the runway thresholds, and this kind of thing. So you have the whole table and you will try as much as possible to see anything in there. In any case, whatever the image is, at the end, controllers have the last word. They are the only one able to say, I will be able to control with this, or I won't be able to control with this. That's all that matters. How to produce image without double objects? Well, you have two possibilities. Either you take different images and you crop them. So basically, if you see that they are overlapping, well, you will crop one of them or both halves, or you will use stitching. How does stitching work? Well, you take an algorithm that will make sure that the band that is common to both images is actually recognized, and then you will merge cameras so that you have your whole panorama that will be a large image that you will be able to present on multiple different screens. In there, once you have your image, you have to see if you prefer to have one screen, one image, which makes presentation much easier, or if you prefer to have a full image, so mostly a stitched one, on multiple screens. In that case, if you want to have multiple screens and the image spans, then you'll need to have as low as small edges as possible. And on the other side, it will allow you more flexibility if you want to change the size of the image. To give you an example here, at the lower half, you can see just different images that are taken from each camera and put aside each other. Then if you stitch them, you would avoid, for example, here you see a small part of the building that is twice, or here the taxiway that is twice. And if you stitch them together, the algorithm will make sure that it's recognized as the same object. And afterwards, you can also apply many different algorithm-based enhancements. So you have a contrast, you have brightness, so stitching as said, you have software optimization, for example, high dynamic range, 4K, this kind of thing. You can have many different things that are able to enhance the image quality at the end. Then once you have your panorama, that's great, but there is something that controllers may use that you still don't have. It's binoculars. And in the tower, binoculars are replaced in the remote tower center by the pan tilt zoom camera. The pan tilt zoom camera actually, well, name says it all. It's just a camera that will be able to move from panning, tilting, and also able to zoom with the same image quality as it has at the beginning. For this, it's the same thing. You will need image quality. It must be moved, as I said, and when you install it on the airport, you have to make sure that you won't have any obstruction. And when I say that, it's pretty obvious that you need to make sure that any building doesn't stand in the way, but you also have to make sure that the cameras doesn't block each other, which is another can be quite challenging depending on the airports. As you can see on the previous, as you could see on the previous image, it's also possible to have the light gun integrated directly inside the pan tilt zoom cameras. The idea is just because if you move the cameras, then it means that you'll be able to move the light gun at the same time, which makes really everything easier. I mean, I don't know if you had any opportunity to actually move the light gun, but this thing is pretty heavy. And if you have to move the light gun and follow plane at the same time, or vehicle or whatever object, moving object, it's can be painful if you stay for a long period of time like this. With the camera, the pan tilt zoom, you can follow a plane directly through algorithm-based object tracking or with data fusion. And if the camera already follows the plane, then the light gun will also follow at the same time. But for this, you need to make sure that the light gun and the camera, the pan tilt zoom, are actually aligned. That if you see something with the camera, you will be able to point at the exact same object, the exact same place with the light gun. If the light gun is integrated within the PTZ, then it's great. Then you won't have to worry about it mechanically. But if it's two different objects that are moving, then you will need a quite good algorithm to make sure that you always point at the same thing. But it's, well, the integrated solution is more expensive. And the last sensor that you can actually use are the microphones. As I said before, microphones are not directly in the EuroK standard, but are really, really useful. I mean, for the ambient sound, for example, having controller controlling the runway, just with the microphone, he could be able to hear if the plane is actually starting the engine, which is great because then he doesn't have to look before. And even if he's really focused on something, this small stimulus, this small sound, will be able to point him where does the information, where does the movement come from. Okay, we saw together what are the different things that are directly on the airport and must be on the airports. Now for the remote tower center itself. The remote tower center itself is actually composed of different remote tower modules. A module is a panorama, and then you have other screens, and then you have one or more interaction touch screens. The panorama itself will show the out of the window view, out the windows view. Other screens can show radar, weather, strips, whatever you want. Sometimes, especially for France, paper strips. And then the interaction touchscreen will be mainly used to move the cameras around the PTZ, either with a finger or with a pen, touch pen. You can also sometimes have an integrated position, having also strips, whether at the same place, could be really useful because then controllers don't need to move around their eyes. But yeah, it depends mainly on what the NSP wants when they actually issue the tender. The big question when you create a remote tower is how do you want to arrange the whole thing? Mainly the panorama. You can have portraits or landscape oriented monitors. You can have monitors complete full circle, but it's really immersive, but tests have shown that it can be a bit too much for controllers, too immersive actually. And then there is the question of how do you get in and out? Or you can have a semi-square, so like 280 or 180. Really depends on what you prefer and what the different tests with the controllers prefer. Also, the costs have to be actually taken, well, considered, because if you have more screens, then it's really much more costly. That's okay, but then you also need space. And space in a remote tower center is something that is really critical, because if you can put one or I don't know, three different um, modules at the same in the same room, that makes a big difference afterwards for the whole facility. If we move towards more concrete examples, here are some above view and side view of what could be a remote tower. Those views are actually respecting the different ergonomical standards from the FAA and from the ISO, even though it's not always easy because those standards are not really made for multiple screens. Well, you do what you can, and then at the end you have always to verify with the users, so the controllers. So here you can see the touch screen that is there, slightly tilted, so that it is always as much as possible perpendicular to the line of sight. And then you have the information screen. So as I said, radar, other systems, legacy systems that could be there. And then you have the panorama. Uh, Arranging everything is not always easy because main problem being you have to make sure each screen is not masking anything behind. So the monitors have to be really carefully arranged, especially if you want to make sure that controllers must be able to control when they're seated and when they are standing, which also from ergonomical point of view is really a major plus. Now to shift to the final example of the more concrete example, you have on the left what is a compact position that is used to control Saarbrücken Airport from Leipzig, so two airports in Germany, used from 2018, I think. And then we call that the compact because it's really the most compact thing we can do at the with enough view of the different screens. You can also see that it's not at all integrated because you just have the panorama and many, many different screens below it. So could be better. Well, and the second one is the what we call the video wall. This one is from Auckland in New Zealand, and it's mainly a demonstrator. So it's not in use for now because yeah, COVID reasons made the project stop. But it's pretty different. It's more immersive. It takes a lot of space. Yeah, depends on the different teams you have, the different controllers you have, the different ANSPs you have. A lot of factors to actually consider. And as I was saying in the beginning, you can also have one module with two CVPs. How does it work? Well, you have one panorama that is shared by two controllers controlling the same airport, exactly as they would in the tower. You will have this big panorama that is actually englobing, curving around the two CWPs, and then all the information screens and the touch screens will be doubled, and each will have their own. It can be useful for immersion. Uh, yeah, as I said here, yeah, it can be useful for interaction because then controllers see the same thing and they are close to each other. So it's really great to work as a team. The problem is mainly that afterwards you have the to decide how do you want to manage the different ownership. If one moves a PTZ, how does it work with the others? Does it move also with the others? Does does each controller actually manages one PTZ? Depends. How to see it, it really depends on the different teams and the NSPs. You can also have two different ones with two different parameters, which takes a lot of more space. But then you have a higher flexibility because you can have two controllers controlling the same airport or two controllers controlling different airports, depending on the workload and everything. So for the center, it's really much easier to manage and also much more standardized. So we saw what was on the airport. We saw what was on the center. Now you have things that are not really specifically linked to a place, mainly the servers and afterwards the recording. So the servers can be placed on the airports. That's mostly what is done. And why is that? Because they can optimize the video stream before it's sent to the remote tower center. That means you can compress it, you can stitch it before it's sent. Instead of sending 16 different camera stream, you can send one big image for the whole panorama. Can be useful. And the other thing is it can also be, the other possibility is that it can also be put in the remote tower center. It eases a lot maintenance because all the servers are at the same place, and that's where you want to have the maintenance guys. But that means that the raw video streams are sent to the center, and that can take a lot of bandwidth. Then you have to see how the servers can be used. Actually, you have video stream quality if you're doing HD or 4K. You have the number of video streams or number of cameras. If you have 3 cameras for
big difference. And the last one is the redundancy. The redundancy is if you want to have different servers working in tandem, or one main and the other one different, acting as a backup. Then you have the different bricks of the remote tower, and the last one is the recording. So recording can be mainly placed at 2 places, as for the servers mainly. Either you put it at the airport and you store the raw video to be able, for example, to make sure that the prime comes from the cameras, to pinpoint where the prime comes from cameras or from the processing unit. Or you can use it at the glass, so to capture the image just before it arrives at the screen. That has the advantage that then you'll be able to record exactly what the controller sees, except if there is a dead pixel or this kind of thing. But it's closest as possible, it's the closest as possible to what the controllers will be able to see. Now for the business cases, we saw the different bricks that are actually composing the remote towers. Now is the question, how is remote tower used? Because you have the bricks, but then you have to see how operations are actually done. To make sure we're all on the same page, you have first the traditional towers. Traditional towers, well, you put the tower on the airport and this tower controls the airport. You can have different towers. For big airports, you can have multiple controllers in the same tower, or just one, or no controller if the airport is not controlled. But it's mainly the kind of thing. The controllers are on the airport controlling with direct view the said airport. If you go to remote towers, you have 5 different operation modes. The first one and the most simple one is the single remote tower operations, and that is the most known mode and the one that is actually used around the world. The idea is you directly replace the direct view with a sensor, and instead of having different towers, you will use one remote tower center. This is mainly done for regional airports, small and regional airports, but it can be used sometimes for big airports, depending on what the NSP actually wants. Then you have the contingency tower. Contingency remote tower is used when there is a problem with the traditional tower on the airport that is normal operations. Then a remote tower module, for example, in the basement of the tower or on another building, most of the time on the said airport, will take over and control the airport. This has the advantage, for example, if the tower has to be rebuilt, then you can have remote tower for a few years or for a few months. If you will have an attack or whatever problem is on the tower or fire, then you can use the remote tower also as a backup in case of emergency without having to close the airport. The third mode is the supplementary view. In that case, you have normal operations, and for whatever reason, one part of the controlled airport or airspace is blocked by something, an obstruction like a building, a newly built building, or airport that was that saw another runway built, but is too far away to actually see it. In that case, remote camera can be used, and uh, cameras are placed, and then new screen is installed in the tower. So it's not away from the tower, it's still traditional tower control, but it's without direct view for at least a part of the airport. The fourth mode is the deployable tower. This is mainly a business operation case for military cases. The idea here is if you want to have a tower, a controlled airspace or a controlled landing zone somewhere for military reason, then you just have to send there a deployable mast, have the connection to a deployable remote tower center, can be on the said airport, but it can be far away. And then by connecting the two of them, you directly have control over a campaign airport or an airport within a war where the tower has been destroyed, kind of thing. So it's easy. It takes less than a day to actually deploy and can be used anywhere around the world. Just have to have a connection between the mast and the modules. And the last one is the multiple remote tower operations. In that case, it's exactly the single remote tower operations with a remote tower center, but you have one controller controlling one or multiple airports at the same time. So single remote tower is controlling multiple airports sequentially. So one after another, for example, you control one airport from 10 to 12, and then another airport from 12 to 2 a.m., 2 p.m., sorry. Yeah. And then you have multiple remote towers. It's at the same time. You have one airport, for example, having, I don't know, 3 movements a day, then other airports having 4 movements a day. It could be useful to actually bring them together and being controlled by the same guy. Makes things easier, and with that low movement rate, then it's not a big impact on workload for the controller. But there are many different challenges, I would say, that are coming, and I will explain in the future in the last part. So we saw the different bricks of the remote tower. We saw how is remote tower used and what are the different operations. And now we have to see what are the different challenges and opportunities offered by remote tower in general. The first one are the operational and commercial advantages. Well, you have 2 different things. Remote tower can offer a lot of cost saving on 2 different areas. The first one is operations, so savings on OpEx. If you have different controllers working the same center, that eases a lot the work of the managers and the supervisors. That means that if one controller is sick and they have multiple qualifications, then another one can take over instead of just closing the airport sometimes, as it is done today sometimes. Especially during COVID, when I don't know, half the team could be sick, can be really useful to have everyone scattered around the same place. You could say that, yes, it's a big problem if you put many different controllers in the same space for, as I said, sickness, COVID. But then you have many different things that could be installed also. And you can also have single remote tower center, different rooms to ease arrangements and to lower the case of sickness spreading around the center. Also for the different controllers, it's not really something that is on savings, but if a controller is actually doing his or her training in a big city and then is sent to a remote location without having taken care about the family or whatever they want, maybe it would be a bit more uh, attractive to have those remote tower centers at the same location in a big city when they have all the services and whatever they want as a um, starting the career. And then the second one that is actually pretty important is the cost saving on capex. So when you have to build the tower, because well, you don't need a tower actually. I will give an example afterwards, but towers have to be built when you create the airport, but then they have to be rebuilt once in a while. I think it's 50 years, but I'm definitely not sure. So if you don't have to build the tower, then that means a lot of things can be saved directly on just this part. But it's not all fairy tale and everything. Remote tower has to overcome a lot of challenges. First one is you have to guarantee the mass equipment functioning despite the meteorological conditions. If you take, for example, we had a case in Iceland. Well, Iceland, you have -30, -40, you have wind, you have snow, you have a lot of things that can actually impact the camera's functioning. At the same time, you can have also Brazil. Brazil, you have 100% humidity, a lot of days uh, during the year, and you also have pretty big birds. And this is just not a joke. The birds are just standing on the cameras, and the beginning that was really a nightmare. The safety analysis have to be reworked. If you introduce more hardware, then that means you have to create more safety cases. You have to create more redundancy that has to be actually investigated. Also, cybersecurity is mandatory because, I mean, it's already really important, but if you put streams over the network, even if it's a VPN, then you need to make sure that everything is done as much as possible according to the cybersecurity guidelines and the most strict ones. You have to provide equivalent image quality, as I explained when I explained the panorama. What controllers see on the tower must be what they see in the different cameras, because I mean, if you lower that, then that can be a huge issue and they won't accept it. And finally, you have all the human factors related issues. You have to make sure that they build convenient situational awareness without the direct view. It can be quite frustrating at the beginning. Can be also the problem of having people working on different airports, but on the same place in the same room. For example, with the ambient sound, can be a bit of a problem at the beginning, or maybe they have these anti-noise walls to be installed. We already saw it. Could be also something, but all those different challenges can be and were overcome. They had to be worked each and every time for each and every airport, because each and every airport has new things, new specific issues that we have to actually work out. But even though you have a lot of different challenges and you can save costs, just from the operator point of view, introducing technology related gains can be done through remote towers. For example, you have the example of having the remote tower using infrared view. If you have a snowstorm, those actually in Iceland, you can have a snowstorm that is actually overcome using infrared. Infrared can see through the storm. Well, depending, for example, when it's raining, it can be a bit more tricky. With the snow, it's okay, or during the night, since the different engines are pretty hot, then you will see this heat also for humans, for animals, for vehicles. It's really convenient. You can also have some panorama overlays. For example, here you can see the approach path that is highlighted. Can be also useful. You can see I also have the weather overlay, so what we call the MET overlay with wind direction. You can have in two different ends, for example, one for the one threshold of the runway and another MET overlay for the other threshold. And you can also have the bounding for the different moving objects. Can be either used for data fusion or for the using the radar data, or with the image, the algorithm detecting anything that moves within the image. And you can also have overlays like these ones, saying, okay, you have data fusions with a track on the radar coming from this plane that is fused with the strip data, and that is actually displayed here to make sure that even if you don't see the plane directly because it's too far away, you will be able to see at least the label to pinpoint where is it, instead of just having red square that doesn't tell you anything before it's closer. And you have also the same improvements for the PTZ. As I said at the beginning, when I was presenting the Lycan, you can have tracking directly during the during use. You just have to click on the moving object, whether it is a helicopter like here, or a plane, or an animal, and then the PTZ will track the moving object throughout. That means that for controllers, it's really useful. They see a radar, a track or a strip coming from the system. They can directly click on it and make the PTZ follow this plane, even if it's far away. It has the data through landing, through running, uh, and through and to the Python slot actually. And they just had one click for this, so it's definitely something that is improving the lives of the different controllers. Also, the PTZ can give information about moving objects that are not planes, for example, animals, with the speed, where it is, actually how farther it is, the exact place, and following it too, to make sure that something that is out of harm at some point will not make its way, I don't know, on the runway, for example. Okay, I think we'll go a bit over the time just to show you a small explanation here. You want to say something, Anna? Okay.
No, not yet. Go ahead.
So yeah. So yeah, it's just an explanation of how could be a remote tower center. It's just, yeah, as I said, something that is hypothetical. You could have something in here, for example, with the different single remote tower operations, with a big panorama and a smaller one, two possibilities. Here you have the single remote tower of what is a standard concept, what we have at Frequentis, with the panorama, with the different integrated systems, and with the touchscreen with directly the strips and how to move the PTZ. And with it, you can have also the multiple remote tower using different panoramas, but that I'll explain later. And all in all, connected to the mast itself. So you see the platform to allow enough space for maintenance. You see the, I don't know, name in English, the treuil in there to move cameras or whatever package you have to move. Then you see the
Jonas, so sorry to interrupt. I think there is an issue with your screen because we cannot see what you are just doing. We see only the wording open virtual world.
Sorry. Then I have to.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. We can
Thank
see
you
it
for
now.
saying. Okay, so now you see this. Yeah, so that's the panorama itself. With yeah, you can see a PTZ here on the side or PTZ on top, and then you see the different rings. I didn't explain, but the first ring could be, for example, the visual spectrum, and then the infrared spectrum. Then you have the platform to actually see enough, have enough space for the maintenance. And then I will go back there. Yeah, since you didn't see before. This is the remote tower, the single remote tower, the standard concept we have at Frequentis, with the panorama, the different information screens, and the touch screen. And this is how the center could actually look like. So everyone at the same place, but with enough space so that it's, yeah, the supervisor actually handling the workload for the different airports and having enough space in between the different remote tower modules so that they don't bother each other. You need to control, to have an accurate situation awareness, so an accurate picture of the traffic on each airport without mixing them. And for the moment, people, I say around the world, but at least I know for Caesar, they are investigating it and how to enhance this situation awareness. So multiple trials are actually in motion to evaluate this. For example, the safety, for example, how many airports can you bring, the different ways to present information. So with, for example, colors, also some algorithm-based help to detect things like alarms if something starts to move. What are the limits of those algorithms and this automated, for example, if it fails? And what could be the changes in operations if we have to make sure that safety is guaranteed? And yeah, as you can see here, also the role of the supervisor who could balance workloads if needs be. So all those are actually still in trials, and yeah, this is not technology that is used compared to the other modes around the world at the moment. Could be in the future, I don't know. And yeah, this is an example of how it could be a remote tower center. So here the live trials at DLR. They had also live trials in Hungary with Caesar. I think FAA is actually also doing it, but yeah, this is still taking a lot of time, resources, and NSPs have that on their own table, but for now it's not finalized, definitely not. So it's been 1 hour. Yeah, so I thought it would be a bit more quick, but had a lot to say. To wrap up everything we saw together, remote tower operations have different realities. So if you see someone saying remote tower, you have to ask which mode of remote tower, because they are pretty different from one to another. Remote tower also needs quite a lot of equipment on the airport and at the center, which means you have to guarantee that, you have to make the safety analysis, you have redundancy maybe. So at the beginning, it can be still costly. And even though this is one of the challenges that is inherent to remote tower, the idea of bringing new technology or the idea of bringing a new operation context also allows to use all the different technology that were developed since the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years. So it's really a good way to provide more safety and ease the work of ATCOs when they are controlling airports, and maybe also to increase safety beyond what is required. Everything I said today is not just research. As I explained to you in the different examples I showed, remote towers are already used around the world. They are safe. They are many different countries are actually trusting them, from Brazil to Germany, from UK to Australia, from US to Jersey. You have the technology is actually for some modes, for some operational modes, ready and used by different ANSPs. But that doesn't mean that it's the end. As we saw before, we have multiple remote tower operations, and still the technology can be enhanced. How it will move around in the next years, I don't know, but still it will evolve and will enhance safety and ease work for many different ATCOs, and I'm pretty sure of that. So thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I will read the chat now, but if you prefer not to say anything now and you want a private conversation, or you have more questions that pop up at the end, don't worry about it. Just have to send me an email to my professional email addresses, and I will make sure to answer it as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Jonas. It was very, very interesting, very complete and instructive, I guess, for everybody who attended the call. Even if a few people had to leave after 1 hour, there are a few questions. So if it's okay for you, I will go through the question raised in the chat. And if anyone wants to just open the mic and comment or ask your questions directly to have a more interactive discussion, please go ahead. So I will start in the order. Huh? So the first question from Shiben was, does remote tower include apron controllers?
Does remote tower include apron controllers? I think that was the example of the Denmark when they have approach capabilities directly in the center. It doesn't have to, but remote towers is mostly controlling ground and airspace around the airport. So approach is not really something aside from it. If you take that out, anything on the airport and anything that traditional towers actually do can be done using remote towers. So I'd say apron also, yes.
Okay. We had another question about the redundancy of the remote infrastructures and how is it managed?
Well, the main idea basically is you double everything. Every camera, every server, every connection, every cable, you will double it up. And that to make sure that if something fails, then you will have a second one. You can be also for the functions. For example, I don't know, if you have a panorama camera failing, then you can still use the PTZ to make up for it, for this hole in the panorama. You can also have, if I said at the beginning, you have one ring of cameras for the panorama and one for the visual spectre and one for the infrared spectre, you'll be able to use one instead of the other if one fails. Generally, we ask our different ANSPs or our different clients to have two different connections between the center and the airport to make sure that if one fails, they have still the other, and to enhance bandwidth. So yeah, in short, everything is doubled. It's not mandatory, but it's at least what we do.
Okay. Maybe I can share also, it was more a comment than a question from Bertrand, who attended a panel at ICAO called ATM Ops, and mentioning that we could also talk about digital air traffic services more than remote tower in terms of wording. Don't know if you agree with that.
It's true. I have to admit that between remote tower, digital tower, virtual tower, different ANSPs using different acronyms, I'm kind of lost. So definitely, if you attended someone's in a panel by people knowing a lot more than me about this and saying that this should be the digital air traffic services, so yeah, that's yeah, they must have their reasons. What I see from my view is that I also agree from what I know, because as you said, you can have the supplementary view included in this acronym, and you can also use new integrated positions within the transition towards remote towers. So for example, if you have the touchscreens, you can introduce also strips. That means that it's not remote towers. You could have also electronic strips using a normal tower, but having that or virtual towers or digital and virtual towers as is usually used could more accurately describe this transition towards more screens with, yeah, still having to take care about more screens is not necessarily better, but yeah, at least the acronyms is more accurate. I agree.
Okay. Next question is about limitations in terms of regulation, limitations of the remote tower regarding capabilities and regulations, maximum aircraft flow or distance from airfield to control site, for example. And I could also add my question in a row. Is there any evolution in terms of training of controllers? You mentioned a bit, but...
So for regulations, I said just a disclaimer. My work as a requirement manager only comes when the regulation has actually asks whatever they want to the NSP, and then NSP comes to us. So I'm not directly in discussion with the safety regulators. I'm more in discussion with our clients, so the NSPs, but normally they have to take into account what they would expect from the regulator and integrate it into their requirements. So just saying it because my answer could be incomplete. From the distance from the between the remote tower center and the airport, I would say I didn't see any requirement up until now. It's mostly you could have the time. It's not really something that is mandatory, but many different regulators and many different ANSPs are basing their requirements on what is asked into the AD 240, 240B for the last version. And this one requires, for example, 1 second between image capture and presentation of the image to the controller. So whatever the distance is, as industrial, we have to make sure that we have 1 second at most, and sometimes 500 milliseconds, sometimes they ask less, between the two of them. That means that I would say distance is really not that big of a problem. I mean, if you add 100 kilometer, if you have fiber, it accounts to what, 1 or 2 milliseconds more, but it's mostly on the server sides and algorithm that you have to make sure that whatever processing you're doing it in the right time frame. The other different limitations related to regulations, this is more on the operational side, and unfortunately, I don't know about it. The only thing I know is that at the end of the project, we always have to rely on controllers, or at least as a human factor specialist, I really want to rely on controllers saying, I want to work with this. I don't know afterwards if they say, I'm okay with working with this, and as a company we are paid. I don't know how they do it with the maximum aircraft flow. Normally this is tested, but the NSP provides us the numbers they want to achieve, and I don't know how those numbers are actually made. And for the second question about the evolutions of the training of the controllers, yes, definitely the training is something pretty different, but it's actually a good thing because it's eased. Instead of having someone in the control room in the tower, then you can use whatever simulator based on remote towers you have. I mean, simulate the difference between a simulator remote tower and a remote tower is really, really smaller than the difference between a tower simulator and a real tower. I mean, it's the same thing. You have screens, you are controlling airports, planes, and those planes are sent through camera. So whether the stream is simulated or a stream is from real cameras is pretty much the same thing. So yes, there are differences in training, um, but for controllers, it's not really that big. For maintenance guys, this is a whole new thing because they have a lot more to do. They have a lot more systems, servers, they have a lot more safety cases, failure cases to actually learn about.
Okay, thank you. There are still a few other questions. One is about animals and natural life. How do we ensure that the camera views are not obstructed by animals or even nest of a bird or web of a spider, for instance?
That has sometimes been a big problem. I mean, just to give you an example, when we were working in Brazil, I mean, I wasn't there, but I heard about it, and the wildlife is pretty different. And when you had those birds nesting on the cameras during the trials at the beginning, I mean, they were huge, and that means that they have all those, well, whatever they were doing on the cameras, that was really messing up the systems. After that, well, that being said, wildlife, if you think about messing with the system, the first thing is that most cameras are equipped with wipers. So if there is, for example, spider, they will move it out. Not a big problem. If birds are nesting on the cameras, what we use most of the time is the light gun. You just point the light gun in there, and this is really not making the birds happy, and they will move around. You can also put pikes on there, like you see on the, I don't know, metro stations, on the buildings, also a possibility. And if you really have a problem at any time, you need to have a maintenance team able to actually intervene on the airport. So it doesn't mean that everyone is moved to the remote tower center. You need to have someone able to, I think it's less than 2 hours. In there, you have to be able to intervene and at least make sure that you understand the system, the problem, and you do the analysis. And yeah, in the extreme cases, that's how we do it. But if not, before that, you can install some bikes. You can use the light gun to make the birds go away. Yeah.
Okay. One question from Frederic is about the proportion of what is the proportion of VFR flights on the airports where we have the remote towers deployed?
That is a good question. I only know mainly two examples. I only know about Tours because this is the most recent one, and I asked a question to the controllers. And I know about Saarbrücken because I also talked to the controllers. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was something like 2/3 of VFR flights or three quarters of VFR flights. Because I mean, regional airports and the main quoting clients of this kind of technology, or the main asking of these technologies, or regional airports and small airports. And those airports are asking this technology. Why? Because low-cost carriers are actually using those airports for their flights. And I mean, if they want to have it, they have to provide control. Because any carrier, I don't know, Ryanair or any other carrier will need control to actually land in there. But nobody wants to actually land without control and with so many VFRs. And in that case, if this is controlled, it's much more appealing to VFRs as well. Training or tourist planes, and in that case, it also brings up the number of VFRs much more than the I4. So that's why it's a big proportion of the whole thing. And also that's why the object tracking is so much important for the different airports and for the controls.
If anyone wants to raise another question, please open the mic or have it in the chat. But besides that, a lot of people are saying thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you IENAC for staying
Of course, my
that
pleasure.
late afterwards.
My pleasure. It was really interesting.
Thank you.
So if we don't have any other question, that can be the end of this session. Maybe just thank you all for attending the call. As I mentioned, it was very interesting. And please, feel free to contact Jonas afterwards if you have any comments or questions. Also, Estelle mentioned all the activities from the association and academy. So you can go on the website or on the application to see the agenda of the following events. And don't forget to subscribe. Of course, this is very important to us, and this is how we can keep going in all the organization of all the events. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you for organizing this, and maybe see you on the next time.
Take care, everybody. Have a good evening.
Merci.
Have a good
Au revoir
evening.
tout le monde.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Merci.
Merci, au revoir.